Okay, so we have seen that the introduction of this additional complexity in our modulator demodulator block uh, comes with certain benefits in terms of our ability to represent the real world communication modems. One is that we can now properly model the concept of bandwidth that the transmitted modulated signals take. The bandwidth is governed by uh, the pulse shape, besides obviously the symbol rate, and that we will see very shortly. Secondly, the receiver filter, the LSI system at the receiver, allows us to filter out of band noise, and that is a very important function that this filter performs. And then, thirdly, uh, there is an important artifact that happens in the real world system, which is known as intersymbol interference, and we are better able to appreciate the the effect of ISI, and specifically we will be better able to conceptualize the need of uh, timing estimation at the receiver, the need for estimating the symbol time and properly accounting for the symbol time, so that our receiver is not unduly affected by the intersymbol interference. Okay, so we have seen earlier that if I have a rectangular pulse in time domain, then the frequency response is sinc shaped, and the main lobe of the sinc function is inversely proportional. The width of the main lobe of the sinc function in the frequency domain is inversely proportional to the width of the time domain pulse. Now, it is it is conceivable, and it is actually uh, conceptually possible to represent each symbol that is being transmitted by a rectangular pulse. So every time, for example, in BPSK we want to send plus A volt, we will send a rectangular pulse whose height is A volt. And whenever we want to send minus A volt, we will send another rectangular pulse whose height is minus A volt. And the resulting rectangular rectangular pulse sequence, um, we have seen in that earlier lecture on the convolution operation. But that time we saw that this rectangular pulse, because its frequency response is sinc shaped, um, in the frequency domain, the bandwidth occupied by this sinc function, yes, fine, it is the main, this main part here, the main lobe, so to speak, uh, is roughly 2 times the symbol rate 1 over Ts. But there is a significant leakage, as you can see, outside of the width of plus minus 1 over Ts, which is plus minus R of S, symbol rate. So even if we are willing to consume a bandwidth which is roughly twice of the symbol rate, this much, even that is not enough, because there is energy leaking out of that width of 2 times the symbol rate. And that leakage of energy does decay as you go further and further away from the center of that main lobe. Unfortunately, the sinc function decays kind of slowly. It decays as 1 over x. That is the definition of sinc, by the way. You may recall sinc is sin x over x type of function, and 1 over x is not rapidly decaying function. And so you may have to reserve as much as maybe 5 or 10 times the symbol rate type of bandwidth. If you're transmitting at, let's say, 100 mega symbols per second, you may have to reserve a bandwidth which is 500 megahertz, or maybe even 1000 megahertz, 1 gigahertz, if you were to use sinc shaped function. Because if you reserve any less than that, then because of this energy leakage which is happening, uh, your transmission may interfere with some channel which is adjacent to the portion of the spectrum that is allocated to you, and that will cause this what is known as adjacent channel interference, and can that can lead to all sorts of problems. You, as an operator of a communication system, you may not even be allowed to operate if you cause so much adjacent channel interference. And so that is why, uh, although this rectangular pulse is an improvement over the impulse sequence that we started out with in our simplified model, so this actually does better reflect the real communication system. By the way, you can imagine that if I were to compress this down to an impulse, then the width of this sink will become very large. So that is why the impulses are never transmitted. But not only impulses, even these square shaped pulses are also not preferred pulse shapes for transmission. And so instead of square pulses, uh, there is something called raised cosine filter, which have a particular shape which is shown like this. You can see that the raised cosine filters are parameterized by a parameter called alpha, and when alpha is equal to 0, uh, the raised cosine filter has a frequency occupancy which is exactly rectangular. And now the width of that rectangle in frequency domain is exactly the symbol rate R of S. So if we make alpha equal to 0, our bandwidth in frequency domain is exact. It is exactly symbol rate. If you are transmitting a symbol sequence at the rate of 100 megasymbols per second, the bandwidth required for you to be able to transmit that 100 symbols per 100 megasymbols per second will be exactly 100 megahertz. So that way we have achieved a very tight occupancy in the frequency domain. But we know that when the frequency domain occupancy is rectangular or a rectangular pulse, in the time domain I have a sink function which is shown by this alpha equal to 0 shape. And you see that this sink function decays again pretty slowly as I move away from t equal to 0. Which means that now I will have, instead of adjacent channel interference in the frequency domain, I will have inter-symbol interference in the time domain. Why? Because the sink function in the time domain is decaying pretty slowly. And so if I make some slight timing error, the repercussion of that timing error will be with me for a long time, meaning for a large number of symbols. I'll be affected by ISI, the inter-symbol interference. But the good thing about this raised cosine filters is that this alpha parameter can be controlled. As we saw, we probably don't want to make alpha equal to 0 all the way down to 0, although that helps us in removing ACI in the frequency domain. But at the same time, we don't probably want to make alpha equal to 1. Well, if you make alpha equal to 1, the time domain pulse decays very rapidly outside of plus minus 1 over t. But in the frequency domain, for alpha equal to 1, the occupancy spreads out to roughly 2 times the symbol rate. And so the general design that is followed is to make alpha somewhere between 0 to 1. For example, if you make alpha equal to 0.5, which is a compromise between 0 and 1, in the time domain our dispersion is not too much, and in the frequency domain also the dispersion is only, let's say, maybe about 1.5 times the symbol rate. So generally, when we are transmitting at a certain symbol rate R of S, let us say R of S is 100 mega symbols per second. Uh, and suppose we have a bandwidth which is, let's say, 110 megahertz. Then using those two parameters, 110 and 100, we would determine the value of alpha that we should use for raise cosine. In this case, alpha will be 0.1. It will be closer to uh, alpha equal to 0. So there will be a lot of ISI in the time domain, but ACI will be controlled very nicely. So this is a very important relationship between the intersymbol interference in the time domain and the adjacent channel interference in the frequency domain, and how both these effects can be traded off by an appropriate choice of this roll-off factor alpha. This alpha is known as the roll-off of raised cosine pulse. Okay. Now, we saw earlier in the earlier block diagram, let us just do a quick recap of it, that at the transmitter compared to the symbol rate of R of S, in order to apply a pulse shape, we have done some type of interpolation and increase the sample rate to P times R of S. Basically, our sample rate has become some factor of P greater than the symbol rate. And therefore, because we are sampling each symbol P times, meaning for every symbol we are collecting capital P different samples, at the receiver we need to actually downsample. Out of capital P samples, we want to select only one sample, which is the right sample that we can then send to the maximum likelihood decision device, which is based on those decision regions. Now, out of capital P samples that we are getting at the output of this receiver filter, this filter over here, the question is which of those P samples to actually choose. If we don't choose this sample appropriately, then actually our receiver performance may deteriorate quite a lot because of the intersymbol interference effect, and also because we will be losing out on this signal energy as well. Now, there is this is an entirely a topic of its own. It will not be covered as a part of this CT 111 course. How to do symbol timing estimation, how to appropriately time our receiver so that it makes the accurate selection of the symbol timing. That's a whole new topic by itself, and in fact there are many textbooks. In fact, the entire textbooks have been devoted to the topic of the timing estimation at the receiver. So we will not spend any time on that, except to say that there is again a visualization tool, a kind of a numerical tool similar to that other numerical tool we have seen, the error vector magnitude. It's similar to that, which is known as eye diagram. And all that the eye diagram is that you take multiple symbols coming out of the receiver filter, and then you just overlay one on the top of the other. And again, assuming that the modulation is binary phase shift keying, some of those symbols will have positive sign, some of them will have negative sign. And so what you will get, well, actually, in case of this rectangular pulse, if you do that overlay, you will get exactly a box. Half of the symbols will be positive, and so they will have this type of shape. The other half will be negative, and so they will have exactly the vertically flipped shape. And because you are overlaying, they all will be on top of each other, and you will get a rectangular box. like what I'm trying to indicate by moving my cursor. If you do the same thing with this raised cosine pulse, then what will happen is this main part of the raised cosine, um, because of the negative sign of BPSK symbols, it will also flip in the sign, and you will get something that looks like sort of like an eye. And so that is why this particular scheme is called eye diagram of the eye diagram at the receiver filter. And whenever the intersymbol interference is not present, the eye will be fully open, at least at one point in the eye diagram. And if that is not possible to see, then you say that eye is partially closed, which implies that there is some intersymbol interference and possibly some noise. So that is what I am showing here. First, I am showing a case where eye is partially closed. So you see that there is not any one particular instant where I can clearly say that there is no interference. Although it seems like at this particular instant, which I have indicated by marker 0, eye is maximally opened, which means that out of capital P samples, I should select the sample that comes here, and I should give this sample to the maximum likelihood decision maker. But I see that there is still a lot of disturbance at this point, which is happening because of the intersymbol interference in this particular case. But otherwise, even if there is no intersymbol interference, there will be some such disturbance because of the impairment of the channel, the noise introduced by the channel. In the second diagram, I'm not having any channel noise, but my design is now such that there is no intersymbol interference at all. And that is seen because the eye is now fully open. At t equal to 0, there is no interference. If I move even a little bit away from t equal to 0, then yes, there is interference. But right at the correct sample instant, if my receiver is somehow able to latch on to the right timing, then there is no interference. So again, how to make sure that the receiver picks up this correct sample at which the eye is maximally open is not the topic of this course, but is something for you to be aware of. Okay, and then finally the last thing is that the filter at the receiver that we have seen in an earlier diagram, let us just quickly look at that one more time. This is the filter that we are focusing on. The eye diagram is obtained by overlapping symbol samples at this point, at the output of the filter. Similarly, we will see that this filter at the receiver, which is essentially the inverse of the transmit pulse shaping filter, plays a crucial role in removing the out of band noise also. And so if I have a particular transmitted signal which is being received in the white noise whose power spectral density we have seen earlier, then by having the filter, and suppose if it is an ideal low pass filter, then what it will do is it will get rid of all of this red colored portion of the power spectral density which falls outside of this gate. And again, this we have seen in an earlier lecture on the convolution operation. Now you will notice that the actual filter is not rectangular in the frequency domain. The actual filter in the frequency domain has this shape. Let's say we use alpha equal to 0.5. then it's not this ideal rectangular gate, but instead it will have this type of response. So fine, it may not be able to entirely zero out all the noise that falls outside of this rectangular window. Maybe there will be some residual part which may leak into the receiver, but still it will actually indeed get rid of a lot of the out of band noise. And a very simple model is to say that if uh, uh, this power spectral density is n naught and the width of this filter is B, capital B, then the noise power is just the area under the main lobe of the filter, the low pass filter, which is just the height times the width n naught times B. And convention is that this n naught times B is taken as 2 times the variance of the noise. Why there is a factor of 2 is a detail that we will not get into. And then from that we can say that the signal to noise ratio PS over Pn is Es over n naught times Rs over B. And in case Rs over B is 1, then the SNR is the same as Es over n naught. When is Rs over B is 1? That we have seen over here. If alpha is equal to 0, which is this case, then Rs over B is 1. Otherwise, Rs over B is 1 over 1 plus alpha. And because alpha is some values less than 1 and greater than 0, you can see that Rs over B is going to be pretty close to 1. It may not be exactly 1, it may be like 0.9 or maybe even 0.8, but it will not become 0. Basically, bandwidth and symbol rates are going to be quite similar. And therefore, Es over n naught and signal to noise ratio are also going to be very similar. Maybe there will be a small factor of 1 over 1 plus alpha that relates the two. One more thing that we will do before we conclude this particular video is to show that the signal power P of S can be written as energy per symbol times the symbol rate R of S. And so for that, again for sake of simplicity, we are going to assume rectangular pulses. Let us say that we have used rectangular pulse function, and again let us assume that for the sake of simplicity that the transmitted signal is BPSK. Then the power is going to be proportional to the amplitude squared. In this case it will be A squared. Energy per symbol is power integrated over time, and so energy will be A squared times Ts. It will be proportional to A squared times Ts. But A squared we have said is equal to power, and so that is why energy per symbol is product of power per symbol times the symbol duration T of S. But symbol duration T of S is 1 over R of S, and so therefore we can say that E of S is PS divided by R of S, and that is why over here we have written P of S as E of ES times R of S from this equation. Okay, so let us conclude this video here, and then I think we will have only one more video after this, and that will be the end of our modulation topic.